Okay, so what we're going to do for the next couple weeks is read the Odyssey. Now, the Odyssey is a really long, epic poem. It's very good, but we're only going to be reading excerpts of it. Now, I'm going to take pictures of the pages that we're going to be reading and put it in a PDF file onto OSS Connect so that you can follow along. But before we start the story, let's get a little bit of a background. So, the Odyssey is Homer's epic of Odysseus's 10-year struggle to return home after the Trojan War. Now, Odysseus battles mythical creatures and gods and goddesses all to get home. Odysseus is also a king. He's the king of Ithaca, and his wife, Queen Penelope, is left at home this whole time while he's fighting wars and journeying back from the Trojan War. She takes care of the house, and he has a son, Telemachus, and they're kind of pressuring her to get remarried because while Odysseus is gone, of course, there's no king, and the son is too young. He's not an adult yet. But Penelope is really in love with Odysseus. Their love is definitely true love. And so she doesn't want to just get remarried. She wants to wait and be faithful to Odysseus. But 10 years, long time. So they think he's dead. So, but she doesn't feel he's dead. She thinks he's still alive, but no one will believe her. So she puts off her suitors, and that's part of the story of Odysseus. We get his story as well as her story. She puts off her suitors and stalls them, hoping that Odysseus will finally come home before she has to remarry. Now, this epic story is written by Homer. He also wrote the Iliad, which chronicles the Trojan War with Achilles and Helen of Troy and that Trojan horse. They built it and climbed inside, and that's how they won the war. Very sneaky, very sneaky. The genre of the Odyssey is epic mythology, so you are going to get a lot of magic and mythical beasts and wizards and gods and goddesses, so it's a lot of fun. Major thematic topics, so hospitality, like what karma, like if you are impolite to people, will that come back on you, and loyalty, Penelope to Odysseus, and also Odysseus's friends to himself. Perseverance, not giving up when things get hard. Vengeance, so revenge plays a bit of a role. Also, the appearance of illusions and like beauty and stuff versus reality. That plays a role, especially because a lot of the gods and goddesses use illusions to try to trick Odysseus, and can he tell reality from fiction? And also spiritual growth. So Odysseus is on a physical journey, but he's also on a spiritual journey. So he kind of grows as a character, and some of the other characters do as well. Now, one of the motifs of the story is mythology, love, and disguises. And major symbols is Laertes' shroud, Odysseus' bow, the sea, and Ithaca, Odysseus' kingdom, where Penelope and his sons still are, is one of the major symbols. There's been major movies and other versions of the Odyssey besides Homer's. It's a very famous story, and partially because it really follows the hero's journey. So before we start reading the Odyssey and getting into this really cool story, I want to talk about archetypes in the hero's journey. So, the hero's journey. The hero's journey is the process that a hero goes through in the course of a story. Now, you may have noticed already that a lot of hero stories are kind of similar, and that's because they all follow like a recipe, a pattern. And this pattern was created way, way, way back, starting with stories like the Odyssey. Now, the Odyssey was written like 700 years BC, so before Jesus was born, and that's how we use our calendar. So, a long time. So we've been repeating this kind of heroic journey, this hero's journey over and over again. And that's kind of why it's somewhat difficult to get people in trouble for like copywriting or plagiarism of stories. The one that comes to mind is Harry Potter. So a lot of people accused her of copying a previous story, and she actually won her case and didn't get in trouble for plagiarism, even though her story closely resembled that of another, because a lot of hero stories, especially the adolescent to manhood stories, they kind of follow the same pattern. So it's kind of hard to say you copied from someone else when they all are following this typical recipe. So it's really important as students of English and English literature to know the hero's journey, to be able to recognize it. And I'm going to put up a PDF like slideshow with all of these notes so you can go back and check that out on OSS Connect, so that you don't have to feel like you're missing anything if I'm talking too fast. You can always replay the video as well. All right, so the hero's journey. I'm going to adjust the screen so I can write as I tell you about it. So here we go. There you go. The hero's journey. So first of all, the hero's journey is a type of recipe that authors use because it kind of resonates with all people, no matter what year they're born or what country they're from or what language they speak. There's this human quality to the hero's journey. And that partly means that they're using archetypes. So I'm going to write that down, you guys. Archetypes. So an archetype is a reoccurring type of character or reoccurring event that resonates with most people. Now, archetype, if you really want to know more about it, was created, the word was created by Carl Jung, but it's spelled with a J, you guys. So he was a very famous psychologist. A lot of what we know about the human mind and the human spheres comes from Carl Jung. Now, Carl Jung kind of classified types of characters that will go in a hero's journey that people really enjoy seeing, that people really resonate to, they understand no matter their language or their culture, like I said. So he believed in a collective unconscious, a common well of memory and thought that connects us all, regardless of where we're from, time-wise or physically. Because of this, our dreams and stories have reoccurring symbols, and one of the main archetypes is the hero himself. So our heroes kind of have the same qualities. First of all, they usually have unusual birth. They have missing parents. They're raised by foster parents. They could be royal or have special heritage, but they're always given a quest and they always require training. Now, famous heroes that follow this archetype is, of course, Harry Potter, but also Dorothy, Robin Hood, Luke Skywalker. They all follow that kind of recipe of a hero that we all love to see. So the hero is the first archetype. The second archetype is the shadow. The shadow is the villain. Obviously, as the name implies, it's kind of dark. Now, it's the antagonist, but what's really important archetype about the villain is that he kind of reflects a possibility the hero could kind of go towards the dark side, the kind of qualities that the hero possesses but rejects because he's the hero and not the villain. But the villain kind of gave in to this. Now, great examples of that would be the Joker in the Batman, also Darth Vader, and Sauron, that big glowing eye from Lord of the Rings. So the next archetype, sorry guys, bear with me, is the shadow. So there's that, the good and the evil are both archetypes in the hero's journey. Now, another archetype, a very common element of the hero's journey, is the mentor. So we all know that the hero needs someone to kind of guide or teach him. So the mentor is, of course, someone like Yoda or Dumbledore, or that guy who teaches the Karate Kid, you know, wax on, wax off. I don't know if you guys know that story, but I do. Okay, and then you also have allies. You also have threshold guardians. That's an archetype in the hero's journey. So you have the things that test the hero to determine if he or she is worthy, and if, of course, they usually are, and so they pass that test. Now, it doesn't have to be like a person or an enemy that's testing them. It can also be a physical thing, like an actual wall. And a great example of this is when Katniss in the very first Hunger Games kind of like figures out the electric fence doesn't have electricity, and she like sneaks through and goes hunting where she's not supposed to. So that electric fence is a type of threshold guardian. So you have the things that test the hero, and that's definitely an archetype. So you have heroes in the shadow as an archetype. The mentor is kind of like a repeating character that you see in a lot of these stories. And then you have threshold. Wow, you guys, it's like being back in class and I can't spell. Okay, threshold guardian. Threshold guardian. And again, I'm going to have this on the PDF that I put up on OSS Connect. So you'll have it in a much more organized way. I just want to remind you as I go along what we've talked about. So good examples of a threshold guardian would be the wall in Katniss, but also like in Harry Potter when he has all of those trials to get to the stone in the Sorcerer's Stone. So you had like the flying keys, and then you had the Cerberus, the three-headed dog. Those are all threshold guardians. Now, another archetype in the hero's journey, a character, is the shapeshifter. Now, I really like those because they're kind of shifty. They can be good or they could be bad. They can help the hero. They can like get in the hero's way, all in the same story. So a famous shapeshifter archetype in a hero's journey would be Loki. Also Golem, and if you guys have watched Disney's Hercules, Megara is actually a shapeshifter because she's not clearly good or clearly evil, so she could be either way. So she's a shifty character. So another characteristic archetype of a hero's journey would be that shifty character, and we call them shapeshifters. So that's another type of archetype in the hero's journey. Then another archetype would be like I said before, the allies. There's like certain quality of allies in the hero's journey that's kind of typical. Now the first one we have is loyal retainers. So the loyal retainer is a servant to the hero or kind of subservient to the hero, but they're kind of heroic themselves. So great examples of this would be Alfred from Batman, and Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings, and Dobby from Harry Potter. Another ally could be kind of like not human necessarily. So we have like Toto from Wizard of Oz and Chewbacca, although he's humanoid, but these are like the characters who are clearly on the hero side and kind of show that the hero is worth following, that they are worthy. Then we have, of course, the battle that will come in later, but usually there's like an evil character the hero has to beat, but sometimes that character can be redeemable. And so we see that with like Darth Vader, and we also see it with Terminator. That's a good example. So not the bad guy, the antagonist that kind of reflects the hero can actually be saved in the end, and that can really show the hero's goodness and honor and heroicness is in the fact that he can redeem evil and turn evil into good. So you'll also get characters like that, and that's kind of part of the recipe. So there's a lot more archetypes. I'm not going to go into any more in much detail, but they will be included in the PDF. So it's interesting. So you might want to go ahead and look at all that. Damsel in distress, star-crossed lovers, which we talked about with Romeo and Juliet. Like humans typically, no matter where they come from, really love that kind of story, the forbidden love. Unfortunately, star-crossed lovers usually ends tragically as shown in Romeo and Juliet. But you also have archetypes of the damsel in distress and the temptress and the outcast. So these are actually really common repeating type characters, and that's called an archetype. So I'll show the board again just so you can see it. So archetypes, again, this was kind of trademarked by Carl Jung, who was a famous psychologist, and he really did a lot of work in studying this. So in the hero's journey, you have to have archetypes, and Carl Jung, again, was the psychologist. And the most, I would say, predominant archetypes would be the hero himself has to follow a certain recipe, and then his villain has to kind of reflect him in some way, the antagonist. The shadow, the hero's own shadow, is kind of following him around, and he's fighting against it. And then you have underneath the hero, you have mentors and shapeshifters. They kind of assist the heroes, although shapeshifters are really fun because they're kind of shifty in that they kind of are on the hero side, but they're also not. And then you have the threshold guardian, which I put under shadow because it's like an obstacle that the hero has to overcome. It's a test of his character. So these are all archetypes of characters or things that are a part of the hero's journey. Now, the next video, I'll talk about the hero's journey itself, and then after that, we'll start reading the Odyssey, the excerpts of the Odyssey that we're going to cover. But thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something today. Bye!